Okay, the topic is network neutrality from an innovation research perspective, a point of view that comes natural when you work at an institute for innovation research, I guess. In my paper I have analyzed and written about a very detailed aspect of this debate, on network neutrality, a very specialized item, but also very important, of course. But for the presentation, I thought it might be a good idea to be a little more general about the discussion on network neutrality, because I'm aware of the fact that not everybody is very informed about this debate. So I will first of all give you an introduction into this topic and try to tell you about what it is all about and why it is important at all. Then I will get to the second point, my actual subject, the role of innovations in this debate, and you will see this is a very important role that innovations have in this debate, but it's not the only one. But I will concentrate on the innovation aspects of the debate. Then I will show you that it is a common method to count up effects of innovation in this debate, so that people say this side of the network or this side has these innovation effects and the other side has these innovation effects, and then they count up and play them out against each other, which you will see I don't think is a very adequate method, and we will see why this is the case. And a summary and conclusions. But first of all, before I start, I want to say something about the background, the context of this contribution. I said I am from Fraunhofer Institute, and it's the Fraunhofer Institute for Systems Innovation Research in Karlsruhe, in southern part of Germany. And this institute is one of over 60 institutes that we have spread all over Germany. And most of those institutes are technical institutes. So they are developing technology, they are programming. You might be aware of role of Fraunhofer at inventing MP3, for example, or at laser technology, or at solar technology. So those institutes are really developing technologies, but we are not. That's why I emphasize this. We are a institute which looks into innovation processes, and we consider ourselves as a think tank within the Fraunhofer Society. And we complement the technical research by looking at and analyzing technological trends, their potentials and effects on the society, economy and organization of science from a social science perspective. So that's our background. And even though we are not a technical institute, we think we have a very good access to the state-of-the-art research and technology development because of our different corporations and linkages to the other technological institutes. So we are a think tank, a social science think tank, and also we are recognized as a Foresight Institute in Germany and also in Europe, I guess, because we have many European projects. Now, the results that I will present in a minute, they root in a series of studies that we did. As preparation for this study, and some of those I listed, and I want to show you just to give you an idea of the projects that we usually do, the spectrum of topics that we deal with, and also, of course, our clients who commission those studies. The first is a long-term perspectives of the telecommunications industry. That's a study we did for the German Ministry of Education and Technology, where we analyzed the different trends for the future, and we sketched the telecommunications world by the year 2020, I guess it was, yes. So it was a foresight study. Then international strategies for broadband rollout, the study we did for the German Bundestag. Then we also looked into the use of media, the future of media use in the IT industry in southern Germany, a project which was commissioned by the state of Baden-Württemberg, so there's a real strong regional aspect to that. And last but not least, we did a study for a large German telecommunications company where we benchmarked innovation indices for the telecommunications industry. So these are some of the background studies we did, and from that starting point, we looked deeper into the network neutrality debate. And as I said, I wanted to first of all to give you an idea about what this debate is all about. And basically, it's all on this slide. It's not that complicated, but we have to look a little bit back into the past to understand what's going on today. And in the past, we had networks where all IP packets were created equal. So there was no prioritizing of those IP packets, and the rule was the packet who arrives the router first goes in first, goes out first also. So that's the so-called best effort principle, which is a central term in the network neutrality debate. So that was in the past, all IP packets were created equal, and now we have a different situation today where we have some IP packets at least who are treated with priority by the network providers. So network providers identify those packets and say if there is a traffic congestion somewhere, they have priority and they get through first before the other packets come. So the other packets have to wait, but they go through first. So and today this is restricted to applications which are time critical, like voice over IP, which, as you know, voice over IP cannot wait because that would mean a loss of data and a loss of voice quality then. But email, for example, or web applications, it's not a big deal if you have to wait a few milliseconds longer for the content to pop up on your screen. So what happens today is that IP packets are prioritized only to a certain extent, and this is mainly done for technical reasons and for network management reasons. When it comes to the question what was the event that divided the past from the present, you could say that probably that was the year 2000 or 2001 when Cisco invented or presented as a first manufacturer deep packet inspection technology. So I have a slide explaining what this is in detail, but probably the year 2001 is the year when we have the break between the past and the present, what we see today. And also, of course, this has to do with the implementation of next generation networks. Then in the future, when we go further into the future, we have different scenarios, or different scenarios are possible. The one at the top and at the bottom are the extreme scenarios, and in the middle there is something in between where the question mark is. So in the future it might be that not only some IP packets are prioritized by the network providers, but that most of the IP traffic follows prioritization rules. And those rules then will be negotiated between network and content providers. So that means content providers like Google or other big content providers might strike deals with network providers, network operators, that their content is special and should be should have priority and should be dealt with priority in their networks. So they get to the users first of all before all others do. And of course you see there is a discrimination potential, because that means that other applications will have to wait then and will arrive the user at the later point in time, which is something which is critical if you are the third-party provider who has not striked a deal with the network provider. So that would mean that prioritizing would be for business reasons, so new revenues for telecommunication companies, because they can ask the content providers to give them part of their income. And so that's a difference to today, where prioritizing is only done for technical reasons. Then on the other side, so at the bottom, there is the other scenario where exactly that is not allowed, or network providers are not allowed to do that, but that regulation forces network neutrality rules and bans the prioritization of IP packets. So that's a scenario very many internet activists prefer, because they say telecommunication operators shall not be allowed to do this and to prioritize content on their own after what they think is worth prioritizing, actually. Okay, as I said, there is one slide explaining more or less what is deep packet inspection, and it's quite easy to understand, because whereas in the past the IP packet header only included information about where this packet comes from and where it goes to, so the origin and the address of the packet. Now with the packet inspection technologies, we know very well what is actually in this packet, what is transported in this packet, and not only the address. So we know, is it email, is it voice over IP, is it web, is it peer-to-peer? So network providers have a very good idea about what is going on within their networks since the introduction of deep packet inspection technologies. Plus IP6 functionalities, that's on a different level, but this also allows network providers to know more about the traffic that is in there, that goes over their networks. So, and that's on the analytical side, so I know what is on my network, and then I can of course do something with this information, and I can, for example, attach different priorities to those different applications, and I can say, okay, like for example, as I said, voice over IP, this means priority high. Voice over IP has a high priority, and whenever there is a traffic jam or a congestion, voice over IP has priority and will get through at first, and then there is a middle level of priority and a low level of priority. So that's what network providers can do. And then another reason or another technical background, maybe so to say, for the network neutrality debate is of course the increasing amount of broadband traffic altogether. Here we see, as Florian also showed us the slide on broadband traffic, we see that still the most part of the traffic over the networks is HTTP. This also includes this also includes streaming audio and media and video, and the other part, 37%, is peer-to-peer. By the way, interesting side mark is that this statistic comes from a company who produces deep packet inspection technology. So the problem is that we don't know an awful lot about what actually is going over the network. So this is very difficult to get this information, but there is some information, and typically now this is from a deep packet inspection company. And within this, I forgot to say, within this HTTP traffic, there is about 10% for YouTube alone. So streaming video is about 10% of this HTTP traffic. There is another analysis from the Internet Engineering Task Force of this year, which says that by this year, 10% of the overall data over the internet consists of audio and video. And the forecast is, the expectation is that by 2015 it's 40%, and then 2020 we will have over 50% of the whole network traffic containing of audio and video. So, but then this is even a conservative estimate actually. So there are other estimates that think it's much higher. A very general information here is that the current volume exchange over the internet, it doubles every year. So you see the extent to which broadband traffic increases. Now, as a summary, there are, well, 5 reasons at least for prioritizing IP traffic. More traffic, as I said, is one reason, of course, network management in all IP networks. Then a second one is that new services, a typical series of new services, they only become possible because of intelligent network management functionalities. So that includes cloud computing, voice over IP, as I said, video telephony, malware inspection, and also high definition and interactive television. So those services really require that you know what is on your network and that you be able to prioritize those streams, otherwise they will not really work to a satisfying extent for a user. The third reason is mobile specific, and it's not really a technical reason, but it is a commercial reason, a business reason, because free IP services they render the business models of operators obsolete. So I wrote in brackets here the Dutch example, and the example is that KPN, the Dutch telecommunication provider, they announced that they will charge extra for a service called WhatsApp. It's a Skype-like, WhatsApp is an SMS-like service, and what happens, there was a big public outcry that KPN shall not do this, and regulators then, in the wake of political pressure, decided to impose network neutrality rules. So they are not allowed to, actually they were not allowed to increase the fees for those WhatsApp and Skype applications. And well, there's a hot debate. We had this at the beginning, at the opening ceremony already touched upon. So that means free IP services are dangerous for network providers, of course, because they attack their established business models. The fourth one is that prioritizing network over the internet, of course, also opens new revenue sources by, as I said, by a network provider. So they can ask the content providers to pay their share for transporting their content. And there is Verizon and Google example, which was also mentioned in the course of this conference. The fifth one is, and yes, it has to be said, there is room for discrimination in this prioritizing of IP traffic, and that would mean, or there is the possibility that network providers privilege their own content, like their own IPTV services over their network, and dedicate bandwidth for their own services instead of services from third parties, which might even be competing services. And the example here is AT&T and Uverse. Uverse is the IPTV offered by network provider AT&T in the United States, and they reserve 15 megs on their fixed network for their Uverse application, and the remaining 5 megs, I guess, they leave to best effort internet. So that means if you are a IPTV provider, an independent IPTV provider, and you want to be reached or used over the AT&T network, you have really bad cards. So you will not really succeed in doing this, because AT&T reserves bandwidth for its own IPTV service. So now, network neutrality stakeholder analysis. A stakeholder analysis is something we usually do when we want to get an overview of actors who are in the field and of their interests and what they have in mind, what also are their fears and what they claim to, what they want to gain there. Maybe this is kind of a information overload at this point of time. We'll just read it out quickly, so maybe it will become clearer then in the course of the next explanations. But it's basically a map of actors, of stakeholders in this discussion. And first of all, there are the internet activists, and they fear that the big business will take over and commercialize the internet. So they say if network providers and big internet companies have their saying, then the internet as we know it today will look completely different, and there will be not this equal and free to use for everyone internet anymore. So these are the internet activists, and they, of course, as you might have already guessed, they ask for a strict regulation and for a strict imposure of network neutrality for network providers. Then the next one are content providers. They fear that their very expensively created content cannot reach customers because of internet congestion. So there is not enough bandwidth for all the different applications. So their fear is, how can we reach our customers if there's congestion in the network? Telecom operators and internet service providers, they fear that their infrastructure, their networks, or bandwidth will become a commodity. Nobody will pay for it anymore, and that they will lose revenue to the content providers who offer their content over their networks and who don't pay very much for using that network actually. National regulators, they fear two things actually. They fear that their national telecommunication industry will be strangled by network neutrality rules on the one hand, and on the other hand they fear that innovation will be stifled by not passing such rules. So they're sitting in the middle and don't really know yet what to do and which side to prefer. And that's also what I wrote here at the top of the slide, that we are currently in the middle of an ongoing discussion. So we have not seen very many decisions. I'm tempted to say no decisions yet, but the Netherlands is one exception to the rule, and also Chile is a country which has already imposed network neutrality rules. But other than that, we are in the middle of a discussion even on a European level, and there are no decisions yet. So then the last stakeholder here are the customers, and they fear that their broadband bill will become more expensive and selective as the flat rate area comes to an end. So they fear that internet will be sliced and they have to pay for different applications and will not get everything for one price for the flat rate. Okay, now the second part is, I will try to be very short here, the role of innovations in the debate. In all those stakeholders, the actors in this discussion that I just showed you, innovations, the concept of innovations plays a very important role. So everybody claims that they know what are the impacts of regulation concerning innovations. So shortly put, actually it is that internet activists think if we if we don't have a network neutrality regulation, there will be no more innovations. And telecommunication providers, they say if there is a regulation, then there will be no more innovation. So that's shortly put in a nutshell the discussion now. On a more general level, the question is, what are the most favorable conditions for innovations? How can future innovations be secured? And what kind of regulatory regime is necessary to make new services and innovative applications possible in the future? And in this discussion, usually there are two levels that are distinguished, and one is application level innovations and the other one is network level innovations. Now I have one slide for each of those level innovations, and I start with the application level innovations. And as you can imagine, these innovations on this level are very much emphasized by the internet activists. So they say
5 minutes.
Okay. They say innovations on this level are very important, and examples here you see them listed here: web portals, and it goes all the way down to all kinds of applications from Google to Amazon and Skype. And they say if network providers were allowed to prioritize certain applications, that would mean that small innovative startup companies would no longer be able to offer their applications on equal grounds and speeds, because they have to first negotiate with the big network providers and come to deals with them, and if their application is not accepted by them, they will not be able to get on their network and not be able to be used by the users. And then they say that innovation activities on this side would generally decrease or come to a halt, actually. So that's their position. On the other hand, we have the network level innovation which includes network access technologies, improved frequency multiplexing, and so on. And again, here you might have guessed that the telecommunication operators and the ISPs are the ones who favor this point of view and who say, just opposite to the internet activists, they say, if we are not allowed to prioritize certain applications, then there will be almost no more application and service innovations anymore, and the NGN functionalities would not be possible. So we cannot innovate the way we want to and we would be able to. So, and they claim that network level innovations would then come to a halt. Okay, then counting up the effects, that is the common method that is usually applied here. And the question is, what is more important? Is it application level innovations or is it network level innovations? More important in terms of economic effects, of job creation, of the future of the internet. So is it this way or is it just the other way around? So the discussion is open, and in fact there were many attempts to do exactly that, to count up the different effects. And I have here one example by Deventer et al. From 2009, and he has investigated 15 different studies on innovation effects of network neutrality, and has tried to conclude and to say plus or minus. Here this means network innovations, and RAND means application innovations. So he puts in pluses and minuses and comes up with a total effect, which is, as you see, not very easy to grasp and not very convincingly, actually. So, and as you might have guessed, there are many problems with this counting up method. One is that the overall result is ambivalent, so there is no clear evidence. You might take very many, even more innovation studies and be on top of the current developments, but then still then you will not get clear evidence on this issue. The other problem is a statistical problem, and it says, or the problem is how do you count effects, and what do you want to include and what do you want to not include. And of course, and we think that is I think this is the most important problem. There is a conceptual problem. Is it still adequate today to play out applications against network effects? And this, of course, has to do with the next generation network surrounding the context of all IP, digital and converging media world. And so we think it is not an adequate method anymore, and the main reason is because there are very many interdependencies between applications and networks, so you cannot have the one without the other, especially in the new surrounding of next generation networks, where you have seen the separate worlds of mobile, fixed network, internet and television come together in a lasagna style way. So it came together, and you can see all kinds of innovations on all those different levels. So we think it's not adequate anymore to separate those application and network effects anymore. And so that is also then the summary here. Very quickly, I tried to show that the network neutrality debate is still ongoing and that innovations play an important role. However, the counting up of innovation effects is not adequate anymore. So this has to, you have to take into account the new converging world. And then I have a more or less disappointing result at the end. It says that, or it states that innovation studies cannot decide on the matter of network neutrality. So if you take all the arguments from innovation research, you will not be able to decide on whether we need or we should avoid network neutrality regulation. So that might seem disappointing, but there are 2 points at least, 2 important conclusions. And the one is basically we need more research, and especially more research on the model to describe innovation processes in this highly interdependent, converging world of all IP next generation networks. So we don't have really good models to describe what is going on, how the innovation process is structured in this area, in this new area. But we should, of course, not go back to separating applications and networks anymore, as many of the researchers still do. And the last conclusion is, if innovation research is not able to decide on the matter, what then is a good idea or a good start to look at when deciding on this discussion? And of course, that implies to look more closely at political and market distribution, market power distribution, and also regulatory traditions and interest structures in the field, in the different countries. So that's the conclusion. There are some hints that come from innovation research, but if you really want to decide on the matter, you have to look at political and market power elements in the different countries. Thank you very much.